You think that flashy violet shirt makes you fit in, old man? Officer Dalton spits the words like they taste bitter, a hard edge slicing through the hush of the private garage. The metallic clack of handcuffs snaps shut around a weathered wrist, unnecessarily tight, intentionally cruel. Samuel Sterling, 75 years seasoned and stronger than many men half his age, doesn't even twitch. He looks down at the cheap steel biting into his skin, then up into the officer's furious, self-righteous face with a calm that only infuriates the man further. "Your joyriding ends today," Dalton growls, shoving Samuel against the polished fender of a vintage 1960s Bentley, as if he's caught some petty criminal instead of a man worth more than most city blocks combined. "You so much as breathe wrong and I'll add resisting to the list." Dalton has no idea, not a whisper of it, that the suspect in cuffs not only owns the Bentley he's pressed against, but also holds the deeds to half the skyscrapers towering above them. He certainly doesn't know that the man he's manhandling is the father of the assistant commissioner who signs off on Dalton's assignments. It's the kind of mistake that doesn't just end a career, it detonates it. The sun outside hangs like a molten coin, trying but failing to pierce the layered concrete of the Galleria's most restricted level. Down here on P1, far below the noise of the city, the air feels cooler, richer, touched with the faint scent of leather seats and polished steel. The place doesn't look like a garage, it looks like a sanctuary for machines worth more than some neighborhoods. Lamborghinis sleep under soft covers. Rolls-Royces sit like crowned monarchs. Electric hypercars hum quietly in their charging bays. This is where true wealth parks its toys. For Samuel, though, the garage has never been about showing off. It's a ritual, a slow descent out of his penthouse and into a place that strips away meetings, titles, and responsibilities. Even titans need a moment of stillness. Before Dalton stormed in like a blunt instrument, Samuel had been enjoying one. He'd settled into the supple cream leather of his midnight blue Bentley Continental, fingers tracing the warm walnut grain of the steering wheel. At 75, his joints weren't stiff, but his patience sometimes was, and a morning drive along the coast was the perfect antidote. A little ocean breeze, a little jazz, a little solitude. He wasn't dressed like a CEO or philanthropist or the architect of the city's most ambitious redevelopment projects. Today, he wore a silk shirt in a deep violet shade that shimmered when he moved, the kind of color that refused to apologize for existing. Cream linen slacks and soft leather loafers completed the picture. He looked like a man who enjoyed life deeply, who had survived enough storms to know sunlight when he saw it. And in truth, he had. A lifetime of fighting for respect in boardrooms where people who looked like him weren't supposed to succeed. A lifetime of building what others said was impossible. A lifetime of refusing to let the world decide who he was allowed to become. But now the world, or at least Officer Mark Dalton, had decided exactly that. Samuel had noticed the cruiser the moment it barreled down the ramp. Police didn't belong here. This garage was reserved for residents and their guests, and the residents were, without exception, people whose names carried weight. Even the usual on-site security, retired detectives with silver hair and quiet senses of humor, moved with a kind of respectful vigilance. The city cruiser rolling in? That was wrong, and the way it squealed into a crooked stop, headlights flooding Samuel's Bentley, was worse. Dalton emerged like a man itching for conflict. Compact, muscular, jaw clenched, eyes sharp with suspicion, and something darker lurking beneath, something untrained, untempered, and dangerous in a man with a weapon and authority. He didn't ask a single question, didn't request ID, didn't notice the car's keyless entry synced to Samuel's watch, didn't notice the building access fob hanging from Samuel's belt. Dalton saw one thing, and one thing only. A black man behind the wheel of an old, immaculate luxury car. A thief, a joyrider, someone out of place. In Dalton's mind, the math solved itself instantly. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked, hand already on the cuffs. Samuel sighed, not out of fear,
but out of the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from being judged by a man who knows nothing about you except his own assumptions. Yet he stepped out calmly, because men like Samuel had learned early that appearing unthreatening could save your life even when you'd earned the right to walk anywhere with your head held high. Dalton hadn't liked that calm, hadn't liked it one bit. Now, as the cuffs dig into Samuel's wrist, the officer's voice drips mockery. "You grandpas think you can just stroll around like you own the place?" Samuel lifts his gaze, slow, deliberate. "I do own the place," he says evenly. Dalton laughs, sharp and ugly. "Sure you do, and I'm the King of England." He pushes Samuel harder against the Bentley, as if trying to force the truth from his bones. Samuel holds on to his composure like a man holding a priceless vase, carefully, deliberately, aware one wrong move could break something that should never be broken. "Officer," Samuel says quietly, "this is a mistake. Let me—" "Oh, it's gonna be a mistake, all right, and you're gonna pay for it." Samuel doesn't answer. Not because he can't, because he's imagining the moment, the beautiful, catastrophic moment when Dalton realizes exactly who he's cuffed. The door at the far end of the garage swings open. Footsteps echo. A uniformed building guard, retired Detective Manny Ortiz, a man who has known Samuel for 20 years, steps into view. His face drains of color the second he sees the scene. But Dalton doesn't notice him yet. He's too busy running a name through his patrol tablet, a name that won't appear in any criminal database because Samuel Sterling doesn't occupy that world. He occupies the one where billionaires host charity galas and mayors request lunch meetings. Manny rushes over, panic in every step. "Officer, hey, what's going on here?" he demands, voice a notch too high. Dalton barely glances at him. "Caught this guy breaking into a classic. Looks like he was about to take it for a spin." Manny blinks. His eyes flick to Samuel. Samuel's expression is unreadable, but the older man gives Manny a single, subtle nod. A silent breath. "Son, stay calm." Manny swallows hard. "Officer," he tries again, voice trembling. Dalton finally turns, annoyance etched across his features. "What?" And Manny says the 7 words that freeze the air in the entire garage. "That man owns this building, and that car." Dalton blinks. The tablet in his hand suddenly feels very heavy. And he's also the father of Assistant Commissioner Sterling. The silence that follows isn't silence at all. It's the sound of a man realizing the ground beneath him has vanished. Samuel finally speaks, his voice low and steady. "Officer Dalton, perhaps you'd like to uncuff me now." Dalton's hands tremble. For the first time, Samuel smiles. Small, knowing, cold. Because some lessons come gently, and some come like a hammer. The sound of the handcuffs hitting the concrete floor echoed like a gunshot. Dalton hadn't meant to drop them. His fingers had simply stopped listening to him. They hung uselessly at his sides, as if they too had realized the magnitude of what he'd done. Samuel stepped away from the Bentley slowly, rubbing the red marks on his wrist. His movements were unhurried, dignified, controlled. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He did not do what a lesser man might have done when faced with such an insult. He simply straightened his violet shirt, smoothing it over his chest with quiet precision, then adjusted the cuffs of his linen sleeves. Manny looked like he was about to faint. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I'm so sorry. Samuel lifted a hand gently. "It's all right, Manny. You didn't do this." He didn't look at Dalton when he said it, which made it sting even more. Dalton swallowed hard. His chest rose sharply once, twice, his brain scrambling for a script, a defense, anything. "Sir, I was responding to a reported suspicious—" Samuel finally turned. One glance.
A single, calm, ageless stare. Dalton's words died like someone had reached into his throat and closed their fist around it. "You assumed," Samuel said softly, "that I didn't belong here." Dalton opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You assumed," Samuel continued, "that a man who looks like me, in a car like mine, must have stolen it." Dalton flinched. "And you assumed," Samuel added, voice still quiet but now edged with steel, "that you understood the situation better than you did, without asking, without checking, without listening." He took one step toward the officer. He did not raise his hands. He did not puff his chest. He did not even stand taller. But somehow, Dalton felt like he was shrinking in front of him. "You made a decision based on your prejudice," Samuel said. "Not on facts, not on training, not on reason." Dalton tried to swallow again, but his throat was too dry. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I'm so sorry, "Yes," Samuel interrupted calmly, "you did." He didn't shout it. He didn't force it. He just stated it like the truth it was. And that, somehow, made it worse. Manny hovered anxiously beside them, clearly torn between wanting to comfort Samuel and wanting to slap Dalton across the back of the head for daring to touch the man he respected more than anyone in the building. "Sir, if you'd like, I can call your son," Manny offered quietly. Dalton's eyes widened. "No," Samuel replied. "There's no need for that." Dalton exhaled shakily in relief. "But," Samuel added, "I imagine he'll hear about this anyway." The relief collapsed into a pit of dread so deep it made Dalton sway. He stepped forward, desperation leaking through his uniform. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I thought I was doing my job." "You didn't ask." Dalton froze. The older man tilted his head slightly, regarding him the way a teacher regards a student who has disappointed them, not out of cruelty, but because they truly expected better. "That is what concerns me most," Samuel said. "Not the mistake. Mistakes happen. But your certainty that you were right when you were not." Dalton dropped his gaze, shame burning across his cheeks. Samuel studied him for a moment. He saw the anger, the insecurity, the rigid fear of looking weak, the misguided belief that force equaled competence. He'd seen men like Dalton before, in boardrooms, in politics, in society. Men who mistook power for intelligence, authority for wisdom, arrogance for strength. Owning your error is the first step to ensuring it never happens again. Dalton blanked. He wasn't expecting wisdom. He was expecting rage, or threats, or revenge. He wasn't prepared for an elderly black man to be the calmest person in the room. "Mr. Sterling, sir, are you going to file a complaint?" Samuel tucked his hands into the pockets of his trousers. The violet silk caught the overhead lights, glinting like some battle flag of quiet rebellion. "That," Samuel said, "depends on what you choose to do next." Dalton looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" Samuel turned, walking slowly toward the elevator. His loafers made soft, measured clicks against the polished floor. After several steps, he stopped and looked back. "Come with me." Dalton hesitated. Manny gestured frantically. "Go, get over there, now." Dalton jogged forward, unsure if he was walking into salvation or sentencing. The elevator door slid open with a soft chime. Samuel stepped inside. Dalton followed, nervous hands clasped behind him like a rookie in front of his commanding officer. They ascended in silence. At floor 24, the executive lobby, reserved for penthouse residents, the doors opened. Dalton froze. The flooring here wasn't tile. It was marble, the kind you only saw in mansions, luxury hotels, or buildings owned by people with generational power. A bronze plaque hung on the wall. Sterling Tower, dedicated to Samuel H. Sterling, founder and visionary. Built with gratitude by the City Development Council. Dalton's mouth dropped open. He had cuffed this man. Samuel stepped out of the elevator without looking back. "Are you coming, officer?" Dalton scrambled after him. They walked through a corridor lined with framed photos, Samuel shaking hands with governors, ribbon cuttings of skyscrapers, awards for philanthropy, community revitalization projects, scholarship funds. Dalton felt smaller with every step. Finally, Samuel stopped before a glass door etched with Sterling Holdings, Executive Boardroom. Inside, the room looked like something out of a Forbes magazine spread. Panoramic skyline, oak conference table, subtle modern art. Samuel did not sit. He turned to Dalton. "Do you know who I was when you saw me in that garage?" "No, sir," Dalton murmured. "Good," Samuel said, "because that means you can learn something important today." He stepped closer. "When you wear that badge, you will encounter people from every walk of life, wealthy, poor, loud, quiet, polished, rough. But your job, your responsibility, is to see clearly, to question, to listen, to verify before you condemn." Dalton swallowed hard. I understand, sir." "No," Samuel said softly, "not yet. But you will." Dalton's eyes flickered with something. Humility, maybe, or the first spark of self-awareness. Samuel held his gaze a long moment, then spoke again, quieter this time. "You could have killed me." Dalton flinched so violently he nearly stepped back. Samuel didn't say it with accusation. He said it with truth, with gravity, with the weary knowledge of a man who had lived long enough to know the cost of assumptions. "You could have killed me." Dalton's voice cracked. I'm sorry." Samuel gave a slow nod. "I accept your apology." He paused. "But that doesn't erase what happened." Dalton's stomach dropped. "But it does give you a chance to be better than the man who walked into that garage." Dalton stared at him. "You're not filing a complaint?" Samuel smiled, small, patient, dangerous. "Officer, you seem to misunderstand. I don't need to file anything." Dalton frowned.
"My son," Samuel said simply, "will ask why I have bruises on my wrist. And when he asks, I'll tell him the truth." Dalton went pale. The assistant commissioner was known for many things: intelligence, fairness, and a zero-tolerance stance on misconduct. But above all, he was known for protecting his father. Samuel stepped back toward the elevator. "Whether your career survives the truth," Samuel said, "depends entirely on what kind of man you choose to be after today." Dalton stood frozen. Samuel pressed the elevator button. As the doors began to close, he looked at Dalton one last time. "Think carefully about that." The doors slid shut. Dalton exhaled, and his knees finally gave out. Samuel Sterling had been handcuffed, shoved, insulted, and publicly humiliated in the span of 15 minutes, an impressive record even for the city's more notoriously reckless officers. But
Despite the sting in his wrists and the shallow ache blooming along his ribs, he remained unnervingly calm. It was the quiet calm of someone who already knew how this story would end. He had lived too long, built too much, and buried too many men who had underestimated him to be rattled by one badge with a chip on his shoulder. Officer Dalton, on the other hand, was unrattling. Not outwardly, no. Outwardly, he was still a strutting rooster, chest puffed, jaw tight, barking orders with the brittle confidence of a man who had never actually been tested. But inside, something was shifting, cracking, a tiny pressure growing behind the sternum like a hairline fissure in a dam. He could feel it, though he didn't understand it yet, that creeping sense that something about this arrest was wrong, off, unstable like a table with one short leg. He just didn't know the leg was his own career. Dalton dragged Samuel toward his cruiser, one hand gripping the old man's arm, the other hovering near his holster as if expecting an ambush. The absurdity didn't escape Samuel. The 75-year-old billionaire was apparently capable of launching a full tactical counterattack with nothing but loafers and a silk shirt. "Move!" Dalton snapped, tugging harder. Samuel didn't resist, but he didn't hurry either. His slow pace infuriated the officer. "You think I'm playing with you? You think this is funny?" "I think," Samuel said, his voice a low, measured baritone that carried far more authority than Dalton's shouted commands, "that you're making a mistake. You don't understand." Dalton's grip tightened. "Oh, I understand just fine. You carjacked a luxury vehicle in a private garage. You resisted instructions. Now you're going to jail." Samuel looked at him with a calm pity that only deepened the officer's frustration. "Young man, I built this garage." Dalton laughed, a choked, incredulous sound. "Yeah, and I built the Eiffel Tower." But the laughter didn't quite land. There was something in the way Samuel had said it. No bravado, no sarcasm, no fear. Just truth, plain and heavy as iron. They were halfway to the cruiser when the elevator chimed. Dalton ignored it at first until he heard the footsteps. Confident ones. Purposeful. Not rushed, not hesitant. Someone who belonged here. Then came the voice. "Dad?" Dalton froze. The word didn't register at first. It was too normal, too human, too utterly out of place in the turmoil he had created. But then he turned. Daniel Sterling, CEO of Sterling Holdings, Forbes cover regular, philanthropist, political kingmaker, and one of the most powerful men in the state, was striding toward them. His tailored charcoal suit moved like water, crisp lines flowing around a frame built from morning boxing workouts and afternoon power meetings. Brushed steel cufflinks glinted with each step. He radiated authority so effortlessly the air itself seemed to part for him. And he did not look confused. He looked furious. When Dalton had imagined his first encounter with the city's elite, it had not included being stared down like a roach found in a five-star kitchen. He swallowed, forcing a neutral expression. "Sir, please stay back. I'm conducting an arrest." Daniel ignored him completely and went to his father's side. "Dad, are you hurt?" His hands moved gently, checking Samuel's wrists, his arms, his ribs. "I'm fine. This one is new to the city." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I can see that." Dalton cleared his throat. "Sir, step back. This individual is under arrest for auto theft and resisting." Daniel turned toward him, and the officer felt the words evaporate in his throat. "Auto theft," Daniel repeated slowly. "You're charging my father, Samuel Sterling, with auto theft of his own car." Dalton blinked. The name hit him like a thrown brick. Sterling. He'd heard it, of course. Everyone had. The name was practically etched into the skyline, but his brain scrambled to catch up.
This is your father? Dalton managed to squeeze out. Yes, Daniel said. The man you've cuffed and slammed into a vehicle is the founder of Sterling Holdings, a company that owns this tower, this garage, and, he stepped closer, voice dropping to a lethal calm, your precinct's pension fund. Dalton felt a sudden wave of cold break across his spine. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His vocal cords felt like they'd been glued together. Now, Daniel continued, with your body camera running and your supervisor listening on dispatch, exactly why you profiled, detained, and assaulted my father in his own parking garage. Dalton's heart slammed against his ribs. Sir, this isn't what it looks like. I responded to a report of a suspicious... There was no report, Daniel cut in sharply. This garage doesn't allow outside calls to dispatch. All security alerts go through our private team, and they didn't call you. Dalton's throat tightened. I saw him in the vehicle and you deemed that a black man in a Bentley couldn't possibly be the owner. Dalton's breath hitched. The accusation landed so precisely he couldn't even deny it convincingly. That's not fair, he stammered. He didn't produce ID. He wasn't required to, Daniel shot back. He was sitting in his own car, in his own garage, minding his own business until you decided to invent a crime. Samuel watched the exchange with an expression that was almost philosophical. He had seen this play out in 100 different forums across his life. Same assumptions, same force, different uniforms. Dalton could feel his career slipping through his fingers like sand. He scrambled for footing. Look, we can talk about this. Maybe we just all got off on the wrong... Daniel stepped forward until they were only inches apart. You put your hands on my father. You cuffed him, you slammed him against a 70-year-old vehicle worth more than your annual salary, and you did it without cause. Dalton opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, his throat working like he might choke on the next words. I didn't know who he was. That, Samuel said finally, is the problem. Dalton turned toward him, eyes wide and desperate. Sir, Mr. Sterling, look, I didn't mean... But Samuel shook his head slowly. You saw a threat where there was none. You saw a criminal where there was a man. You made a judgment based on the color of my skin, not the content of my character. And that judgment may cost you. Dalton swallowed, the sound loud in the silent garage. Please, he whispered. But mercy wasn't his to ask for. Not anymore. Because the elevator chimed again. And this time, 6 uniformed Galleria security officers stepped out, all wearing the Sterling crest on their shoulder patches. Behind them came a woman in a tailored navy suit holding a leather portfolio and a phone already pressed to her ear. Sterling Holdings, head of legal affairs. Dalton's world tilted. He wasn't just in trouble. He was in free fall. Samuel lifted his cuffed wrists slightly. Shall we remove these? He asked mildly. But it wasn't really a question. And suddenly Dalton understood the truth he had been too arrogant to consider. He hadn't arrested a criminal. He had arrested the man who owned the world he was standing in. And the world was about to respond.
The moment the legal team stepped out of the elevator, the temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. The air grew still, heavy, charged. Even the polished floor seemed to hold its breath. Dalton, still gripping Samuel's arm, felt something primal flare in his chest. Fear. Not the fear of physical harm, not the fear of being outnumbered, but the fear of having no control, of watching a situation spiral into a place beyond salvage. The woman with the portfolio approached like a judge entering a courtroom. Her name was Veronica Price, senior legal counsel for Sterling Holdings, legendary for dismantling corporate opponents with the quiet efficiency of a scalpel. The sound of her heels clicking across the concrete echoed like a countdown. "Mr. Sterling," she said, giving Samuel a respectful nod, "we received the alert from the building's emergency feed. Security pinged me immediately. Are you injured?" "Only my patience," Samuel replied. Veronica's gaze slid sharply to Dalton, dissecting him in a single glance. If Samuel's calm unnerved him, her stare was a full-body indictment. "Remove the handcuffs," she said to him. Not demanded, simply stated, as if it were already happening. Dalton fumbled with the keys. His hands shook so badly he dropped them, twice. "Officer," she said, her voice like ice along the spine, "I'm not going to repeat myself." Finally, the cuffs clicked open. Samuel flexed his wrists, the red marks vivid against his skin. He didn't wince, but Dalton did. Something about the sight, an elderly man marked by his own hand, made a sour churn twist deep in his gut. The Galleria security team formed a semicircle behind Daniel and Veronica, their posture rigid, trained, coordinated. They weren't armed, but they didn't need to be. Their presence alone carried authority. Dalton took a step back, chest rising and falling fast. His radio crackled. "Unit 12 Charlie, status! You've gone silent." Dalton swallowed and reached for the radio on his shoulder, but Veronica held up a finger. "No," she said. "Mr. Sterling, would you like him to explain this to his supervisor here, or shall we handle this formally?" Daniel glanced at his father. Samuel gave a small shrug, as if to say, let the boy dig his own grave. Daniel nodded once. "Explain yourself," he told Dalton. Dalton cleared his throat. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12 Charlie. Situation is—" He paused, eyes flicking between the faces surrounding him. Every expression was steady, expectant, judging. "Situation under control." Veronica raised her brows. "Is that what we're calling this?" Dalton hesitated, then forced himself to continue. "I detained an individual I believe to be engaged in auto theft. Turns out he wasn't." "Turns out," he repeated, voice low and disdainful. "You could have confirmed that before you put your hands on him." Dalton's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, he refused to show ID." "He wasn't required to," Veronica cut in. "This is private property. He had access, you did not." Dalton grasped at the last scraps of his authority. "The garage door was open. Anyone could have wandered in. I saw a suspicious individual in a luxury vehicle. I acted." "He was sitting with the key in the driver's seat, calmly. Not hot-wiring, not fleeing, not even startled. The only suspicious activity here is your behavior." Dalton exhaled, trying not to sound desperate. "Okay, look, maybe I misread the situation. Maybe I acted too quickly. But I believed there was a crime happening, and you can't punish me for trying to—" "You didn't try to stop a crime," Daniel snapped. "You invented one." Dalton's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, I was not profiling him. I was not—" Veronica stepped closer. "Officer, your body cam footage will tell us exactly what you were doing." Dalton froze. His body cam. He had forgotten it was still rolling. "Let's take a look," Veronica said. Two of the security officers stepped forward, producing a tablet linked to the building's surveillance system. One tapped the screen, another connected the signal receiver. Dalton's objections died on his tongue. The footage appeared. There he was, storming into the garage, hostile before he even approached the Bentley, barking orders, grabbing Samuel's arm, ignoring calm explanations, raising his voice, shoving an elderly man against a car worth more than the cruiser he had burst in with. Then came the words, "You think that flashy shirt makes you look like you belong? Get out of the car, now." The garage was silent as the echo of that sentence replayed in the real world. Dalton's face drained of color. That's not what I meant," he stammered. It came out wrong. It came out truthfully. That's the difference, Samuel said. Veronica slowly crossed her arms. Officer Dalton, do you understand the legal implications of what we've just witnessed? Assault on a senior citizen, false arrest, unlawful detainment, abuse of authority, racial profiling, trespassing on private property, interference with private security operations, not to mention the city's own internal review procedures, which will be thorough. Dalton felt sweat trickle down his back. I'm willing to apologize. Mr. Sterling, sir, I am truly sorry. I made a mistake. A big one. Things are different here from where I was stationed before. I reacted based on fear, Samuel asked quietly. Dalton hesitated, then nodded. Yes, if I'm honest, yes. A black man in a Bentley made you afraid. Dalton looked away. That's the truth, Samuel continued, and until you understand why, nothing will change. Daniel stepped forward. Officer Dalton, do you know who my father is, truly? Do you know how many times he's been mistaken, dismissed, disrespected, underestimated by men who look at him and see what you saw? Dalton swallowed hard. I didn't mean... Intent isn't a shield, Veronica said. It's an explanation, one that does not erase harm. The officer's composure cracked. His voice fell to a raw whisper. Please, I have a family, kids. This will ruin me. Daniel's expression didn't soften. It sharpened. You should have thought about that before assaulting a 75-year-old man. Dalton's throat bobbed. His eyes flickered to Samuel, pleading. Mr. Sterling, I know I don't owe you anything, but please, is there anything I can do? Samuel looked at him for a long moment, so long the others wondered whether he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, not angry, not vindictive, just heavy. You can start, Samuel, by letting go of the story in your head, the one that tells you who belongs and who doesn't, the one that keeps getting men like me killed. Dalton's breath stuttered. Second, Samuel continued, you will face the consequences of your actions, not because I seek revenge, but because if there are no consequences, the next man you treat this way may not walk away.
Veronica nodded. Well said. Dalton stood there, shoulders slumped, stunned into silence. Then the elevator chimed one more time. A new voice entered the garage, firm, authoritative, lethal to Dalton's remaining hope. Officer Dalton, the precinct captain said as he stepped out, we need to talk. Dalton turned, his face hollow. The confrontation wasn't over. It was just beginning.
The garage felt colder by the time Captain Alvarez reached Dalton. The man was broad-shouldered and weathered, with a face carved by years of keeping the city from devouring itself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His mere presence was enough to shrink Dalton into something small and shaking. "Officer," Alvarez said, "step away from Mr. Sterling." Dalton obeyed instantly, like a child caught between a lie and a punishment he already knew was coming. His throat clicked as he swallowed the panic rising in him. "Captain," he started. "Sir, I can explain." "No," Alvarez said. "You can't." The captain turned to Daniel and Samuel, nodding with the wary respect of a man who understood exactly how deep the consequences could run if this wasn't handled with surgical precision. Mr. Sterling, he said, addressing them both, "I am deeply sorry. I'm going to take full responsibility for what happened here today." "You weren't the one who assaulted me," Samuel said quietly. "No," Alvarez agreed, "but I hired the man who did, and that makes this my problem." It was an admission with weight. Dalton felt it hit him like a punch. Alvarez didn't look at him. The captain's gaze stayed forward, rigid with disappointment. "Mark," he said at last, "I gave you a chance when other precincts didn't want you. I vouched for you. And this is what you do the first month on the job. Dalton's breath trembled. Captain, Sir, I wasn't trying to— Don't lie to me, Alvarez snapped. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, final. You profile people. I've had complaints already. I told myself they were misunderstandings, growing pains, cultural adjustment. He shook his head. But now I'm looking at hard evidence. Dalton glanced toward the tablet, where his body cam footage still sat frozen on one humiliating frame. Him grabbing Samuel, shoving him against the Bentley. Captain, please, he whispered. I made a mistake, a major one. But I didn't mean harm. I swear to you, I didn't mean harm. Alvarez stared at him for a long, quiet moment. Intent, the captain said, echoing Veronica's earlier words, is not the same as impact. Dalton felt something twist deep inside his chest, a slow, crushing realization that he was out of moves. Turn in your badge and weapon. Dalton's head snapped up. Sir? Do it, the captain repeated, voice low but immovable. For now, consider yourself on immediate administrative leave pending internal review. It'll ruin me, Dalton whispered. You know what suspension means. You know what an inquiry will look like. Yes, Alvarez said, and you earned it. Dalton's breath came shallow and fast. Rage and panic tangled in his chest. He slid a trembling hand to his belt, unhooking the badge he had fought so hard to earn. The medal, once a symbol of purpose, felt heavy as regret. He placed it in Alvarez's outstretched hand. Then the gun. The shift in the garage was almost physical. Security officers stood easier. Veronica's shoulders relaxed by a fraction. Daniel's jaw unclenched. Samuel? His expression didn't change at all. He watched the exchange with the same calm he had held since the moment this began. But there was something else behind his eyes. Something ancient and tired. A disappointment so old it no longer surprised him. Alvarez closed his hand around the badge. Go wait in the cruiser. Dalton didn't move. He stared at Samuel. The older man's posture was steady, dignified, not vengeful, not triumphant. Just there. Just true. I really am sorry, Dalton said, the words scraping their way out. Samuel nodded once. Then let it make you better. Dalton didn't know how to respond. He turned and walked toward the cruiser, his steps uneven, his breath brittle. When he reached the door, he collapsed into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. The sound echoed, like a coffin lid closing. Daniel exhaled slowly. Dad, he said, turning to Samuel, are you all right? Samuel rolled his wrists, testing the soreness, ignoring the red marks. I've been through worse, much worse. That's not the point, he snapped. You shouldn't have to keep going through any of this. Samuel gave him a small smile. The world hasn't changed as much as we pretend it has. Veronica cleared her throat. Mr. Sterling, I'll file the official complaints. You won't need to lift a finger. Samuel nodded. Thank you, Veronica. She hesitated. There's another matter. Daniel's head tilted. What is it? Veronica lifted her portfolio and removed a folded paper. She handed it to Daniel, who scanned it quickly, then frowned. What is this? He asked. A preliminary. Social media is already picking up the incident. What? Daniel said sharply. Veronica nodded. Someone in the building recorded a portion of the confrontation from the mezzanine level. It's already on Twitter, TikTok, and 2 local community pages. Daniel's voice dropped an octave. How bad? She paused. It's labeled, Police Assault Elderly Man in Luxury Garage. The comments are— She paused. Volatile. Samuel sighed. Of course. Daniel rubbed his face. We need to get ahead of this. I agree, Veronica said. If the video spreads before we correct the narrative, it won't just be about Officer Dalton's actions. It'll become political, social, racial, and attached to your family name. Samuel waved a dismissive hand. Let them talk. It's not about them, Daniel said. It's about the board, the shareholders, the media. You know how fast a story can be twisted. Samuel didn't respond. He knew. Oh, he knew. Do you want me to release a statement? Veronica asked. Samuel shook his head. Not yet. Daniel looked at him. Dad? Not yet.
Samuel repeated. "There is truth here, and there is noise. I'm not interested in the noise." Daniel exhaled. "Then what do you want to do?" Samuel looked around the garage, the Bentley, the polished floors, the silent witnesses of wealth and prejudice, and everything in between. "I want the truth, and I want accountability, but not revenge. That man has a family, children. If I destroy him completely, what does that make me?" Veronica studied him. "Fair, but be aware, if you don't control the message, someone else will." Samuel nodded. Then a new voice echoed from the entrance. "Well, well, looks like I came right on time."
Every head turned. A woman stepped into the garage, tall, poised, wearing a camera crew badge on her lanyard. A local investigative journalist, one Samuel knew. Her presence meant one thing. The story was out, and the world was watching. Samuel squared his shoulders. The fallout was no longer theoretical. It had arrived.
By the time Samuel Sterling stepped out of the garage and into the afternoon light, the world had already changed. Not for him, for everyone else. Because while he walked slowly, calmly, intentionally, the internet ran. Within 2 hours, the video of Officer Dalton slamming a 75-year-old black man against a Bentley had crossed 200,000 views. Within 4 hours, it hit 3 million. And by sunset, the hashtag #HandsOffSterling was trending nationwide. Samuel didn't ask for any of it. He didn't want any of it. He'd spent his life building quietly, living with dignity, protecting his family name. But silence was no longer something the world would allow him. He and Daniel stood outside the lobby doors as journalists swarmed like a shaken hive. Cameras flashed, microphones stretched forward like metallic spears, and every question stung with accusation. "Mr. Sterling, is it true that the officer assaulted you without cause? Did racial profiling play a role? Are you planning to sue the police department? Are you pressing charges?" Samuel kept his gaze ahead, giving no fuel to the fire. Daniel stayed close, an unyielding presence at his father's side, but even he couldn't hide the anger simmering beneath his skin. "It's only going to get worse," Daniel muttered. Samuel nodded. Yes. He had lived through decades of bias with a straight spine and a steady hand. But this virality, this frenzy, was new. It was explosive. It was uncontrollable. "Dad," Daniel said, lowering his voice, "I know you want to take the high road. I know you want justice without destruction. But this is becoming bigger than you. This is becoming symbolic." Samuel sighed softly. He knew. He could already feel the weight of other people's narratives pressing onto him. He wasn't just Samuel Sterling anymore. He was becoming a headline, a rallying point, an image pasted across opinion pieces. Symbols, he thought, were far heavier than truth. Before he or Daniel could move, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Make way! Out of the way!" It was Veronica, sharp as steel and twice as efficient, guiding 3 building guards who formed a human shield around the Sterlings. "This is a private residence. Back up, now! Move your equipment off the entrance!" Some obeyed, many didn't, but they shifted enough for the guards to usher Samuel and Daniel inside. As the glass doors slid shut, muffling the chaos outside, Samuel exhaled. "Thank you," he told Veronica. "You'll want to save that for later, because things are escalating faster than we anticipated." She led them into a quiet conference room on the mezzanine level. Screens on the wall were already displaying news segments, tweets, and reaction videos. A reporter was saying,
Witness claims the officer approached the elderly man aggressively without questioning him first. A content creator chimed in. You can see it right there. Look how quickly the officer grabs him. That's not procedure. That's ego. Someone else. Who handcuffs a 75-year-old man? What threat could he possibly be? The commentary didn't stop. It kept looping, multiplying, growing. Daniel clenched his jaw. Dad, this is spiraling. Veronica tapped the screen to mute it. 3 news stations want to interview Samuel, 5 civil rights organizations have reached out, and... Her eyes flicked to Daniel. What? Daniel demanded. Your board has requested an emergency meeting. His breath hitched. What? Why? Veronica glanced at Samuel before answering. Because your father isn't just a man, he's a majority shareholder. And when a majority shareholder becomes the face of a national controversy, the board worries about stability. Stockholders panic. Rumors start. Samuel pursed his lips. We don't answer to panic. No, Veronica agreed. But you do answer to perception. And the longer this goes unmanaged, the more power you lose over the narrative. Daniel paced, raking a hand through his hair. I can handle the board, Dad, but someone needs to address the public. Samuel shook his head. I don't want this to become political. Veronica leaned forward. Sir, with respect, it already is. Silence settled in the room like a heavy fog. Samuel rubbed his wrists unconsciously. The raw red marks hadn't faded. He said quietly, Let me make one thing clear. I don't want that man's job destroyed. I don't want his children to grow up hating the color of another man's skin. I want accountability, yes. I want honesty. I want reform where reform is due. But revenge? No. We gain nothing from that. Daniel stopped pacing. But who said anything about revenge? Dad, this is about saving your reputation, our family, Sterling Holdings. It's about all the people we employ. Samuel looked out the window. From this height, he could see the city sprawled beneath him, one he had poured a lifetime into helping build. And yet in all that growth, all that progress, here he stood again, another black man fighting to justify his place in the world. It was exhausting, a deep, marrow-level exhaustion. Samuel said softly, Veronica, play the video again. She hesitated, then pressed a button. The room filled with the sounds of the altercation, Dalton barking commands, the clatter of cuffs, Samuel's steady calm in the face of humiliation. Daniel looked away. Veronica swallowed hard. Samuel watched his own figure on the screen, watched himself being shoved, watched the confusion and frustration flicker across his features. But what struck him wasn't Dalton's aggression. It was the silence of the bystanders. Dozens of residents had passed through the garage. Not one had stepped forward. Not one had spoken. He had survived segregation, discrimination, hardship, but somehow that silence cut deeper than the officer's hands ever could.
Turn it off, Samuel said quietly. Daniel looked at him. Dad! Daniel, Samuel said, more firmly this time. Not everything must be answered in the heat of anger. But silence is not surrender, Samuel finished. Veronica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face tensed. What now? Daniel asked. A message from the mayor, she said. She wants to speak with Samuel privately. The mayor? Daniel echoed. Samuel nodded slowly. Of course she does. Veronica cleared her throat. And there's something else. Samuel raised a brow. Yes? A group of community leaders is gathering downstairs. They want to meet you. They're calling this an injustice that can't be ignored. Daniel's eyes widened. Dad, you're becoming the center of a movement. Samuel exhaled deeply. A movement he had never asked for. A spotlight he didn't want, a responsibility he feared could consume him. But as he stood there, wrists still aching, dignity still intact, he wondered, maybe the world didn't need his permission. Maybe it simply needed his voice. Before he could answer, before he could decide, a knock echoed against the conference room door. It opened slowly, and the person standing on the other side would change everything again.
The door creaked open, with the kind of hesitation that suggested whoever stood behind it wasn't sure they belonged there. Daniel straightened instinctively, tension tightening his shoulders, while Samuel turned with slow, measured grace. A woman stepped into the conference room. Mid-40s, composed, wearing a charcoal suit that was tailored but not flashy. Her curls were pinned back, her expression earnest and heavy with purpose. She wasn't a journalist, not a politician, not a lawyer. "Mr. Sterling?" she asked softly. "Yes," Samuel replied. She took a steady breath. "My name is Dr. Camille Foster. I'm the chair of the Community Justice Alliance." A pause. "And my brother was killed during a traffic stop 3 years ago." Silence fell across the room like a dropped curtain. Daniel swallowed hard. Veronica's rigid posture softened almost imperceptibly. Samuel's eyes, tired, reflective, probing, narrowed with recognition, not of her identity, but of her pain. Dr. Foster continued, her voice trembling at the edges. "I'm not here to exploit what happened to you. I'm not here to drag you into a cause you haven't chosen. I came because—" She blinked rapidly, steadying herself. "Because what happened in that garage has lit a fuse we've been trying to ignite for years." She stepped further inside, hands clasped. "People are listening now. To you, to this. And whether you want it or not, your voice carries." Samuel stared at her for a long moment. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "Thank you. But grief eventually asks something of you. Mine demanded that I try to make sure it never happens to anyone else." Samuel nodded, understanding all too well the way life bends into purpose when pushed hard enough. Daniel spoke next. "So what exactly are you asking of my father?" Dr. Foster met his gaze. "I'm asking for him to speak. Honestly, publicly, with the dignity he showed even as that man shoved him against a car." She turned to Samuel. "I watched the video. The whole country did. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't fight. You didn't provoke anything. You simply existed in a place someone else thought you didn't belong." A muscle in Daniel's jaw twitched. Dr. Foster pressed on. "People will follow you, Mr. Sterling, because you represent the truth they've lived with but haven't been able to articulate with the same grace and clarity." Samuel sighed deeply. "Doctor, I understand your mission, and I honor it. But I am not an activist. I am not a politician. I'm an old man who has spent his life trying to avoid conflict, not lead a parade into it." "Conflict found you," Dr. Foster said gently. "And whether you step forward or step aside, this moment will move. The question is whether it will move with your guidance or without it." Her words lingered, heavy and unavoidable. Before Samuel could answer, Veronica's tablet buzzed sharply. She glanced down and her expression froze. "What is it?" Daniel asked. She turned the screen toward them. A live stream was playing, taken outside their building. Hundreds of people had gathered, signs held high, voices raised, anger mixing with hope, frustration with solidarity. And then the camera panned to the entrance. A single police cruiser sat idling there, its presence sparking waves of shouting and tension. "Oh, God," Daniel muttered. Samuel's brows knit. "They sent patrol?" "It's not official," Veronica said quickly. "Probably just officers trying to do crowd control, but people think the department is trying to intimidate them." On the live stream, a woman shouted, "Back up! We're not scared of you." A man yelled, "No more harassment! Protect us! Don't threaten us!" Dr. Foster pressed a hand against her chest. "This is turning volatile." Another news ticker flashed across the screen. "City mayor to hold press conference tonight. Unacceptable incident under review." Daniel looked between everyone in the room. "We're losing control of the narrative." "No," Dr. Foster corrected. "The narrative is trying to lead itself. The question is whether anyone responsible will step up and guide it before something breaks." Samuel closed his eyes briefly. He could feel the weight, the expectations, the demands of a community that saw in him a reflection of their own struggles. When he spoke, his voice was soft but unwavering. "What do you all want me to say?" Dr. Foster shook her head. "I can't tell you what to say, only that people need to hear your truth. Not a statement crafted by PR, not something cautious and sanitized. They need your experience, your humanity, and your composure, because right now people are angry, and anger without direction becomes destruction." Daniel stepped closer. "Dad, you've spent your whole life teaching me that leadership isn't something you seek, it's something you're called into. Maybe this is your call." Samuel's gaze drifted to the window again. Outside, the crowd continued to swell, voices rising, signs waving, emotion building like a storm. Inside, the eyes of everyone waited on him. He took a slow, deliberate breath. "Veronica, bring me a microphone." She blinked, stunned. "Sir?" "I'm going downstairs." Daniel's eyes widened. "Dad, there are hundreds of people, and they are here because of me," Samuel replied calmly. "It would be cowardice to hide behind glass while they stand in the street, risking whatever may come." Dr. Foster stared at him, admiration softening her features. "If you speak," she whispered, "everything changes." Samuel gave a small, almost weary smile. "Then let us pray it changes for..."
10 minutes later, Samuel stood at the main entrance of the Sterling Tower's lobby. The glass doors were still shut. The guards looked nervous. Veronica held the portable microphone, already synced to the building's exterior speakers. "You're sure about this?" Daniel asked, searching his father's face for any sign of hesitation. "Yes," Samuel said simply. Daniel swallowed. "Then I'm standing right beside you." The faint warmth touched Samuel's features. "I would expect nothing less." The doors slid open. A rush of noise, raw, unfiltered, impassioned, washed over them. People gasped when they saw him. Others cheered, some cried. The chants quieted as Samuel took a step forward onto the stone landing, microphone in hand. Daniel lingered half a step behind, solid as a pillar. Samuel looked out over the sea of faces. He didn't see strangers. He saw generations. He saw stories. He saw wounds that never fully healed. He saw hope begging not to be disappointed again. He lifted the microphone. His voice carried across the plaza, calm but resonant. "My name is Samuel Sterling," he began. The crowd hushed, leaning into every syllable. "And I am tired." The honesty in that single sentence struck like a bell. "But I am not broken, and I refuse, absolutely refuse, to let fear dictate the way I live or the way any of you live." Murmurs rippled, heads nodded,
Tears glistened. "I did not come out here to condemn. I came to remind us that dignity is not earned. It is inherent. It is ours by birthright. And when it is threatened, we rise." A swell of applause. A cry from the back, "Speak!" Samuel pressed on. "I do not hate the man who laid hands on me. I do not wish him harm. But accountability is not the enemy of peace. It is the foundation of justice." Now the crowd rose louder, a wave of agreement lifting through the crowd. He paused, letting the noise settle. "Let us be a community that demands better, not through violence, not through vengeance, but through courage, truth, and unity." His voice deepened with conviction. "Let this moment not be remembered as the day Samuel Sterling was pushed to the ground." The crowd leaned closer. "But as the day we all stood up." The applause thundered. Some chanted his name, others sobbed, some simply stood still, absorbing a lifetime of emotion finally given shape. Daniel looked at his father with something like awe. Dr. Foster wiped tears from her eyes. Veronica exhaled a breath she'd been holding the entire time. And Samuel, for the first time since that officer's hands had touched him, felt something settle inside his chest. Not relief, not triumph. Purpose. He lowered the microphone. The crowd roared. And somewhere in that deep, resounding noise, a turning point took root.
The crowd still echoed in Samuel's bones long after he stepped back inside the building. Their chants, his name, their demands, their hunger for justice had been a living thing, pulsing under his words like a heartbeat amplified by thousands. Now, in the quiet of the marble-lined lobby, the contrast made his pulse seem unnaturally loud. Daniel held his father's arm lightly, not guiding him, but steadying him. "Dad," he said softly, "that was beyond anything I've ever seen." Samuel exhaled. It felt like standing against a tide and realizing the tide wasn't there to drown me. It was there to lift me. Veronica approached, tablet in hand, her face a careful blend of awe and mild panic. "Sir, you need to see this." She tapped a feed open, then another and another. News anchors across every major network replayed Samuel's speech. Analysts dissected every sentence. Commentators argued over what this meant for the city, for national politics, for policing practices. The internet was ablaze. Hashtags multiplying by the minute. One headline scrolled across the bottom of a broadcast. "Police union demands fair investigation, but city council calls incident a disgrace." Another read, "Department launches internal affairs probe and Officer Dalton placed on administrative leave." Daniel's expression hardened. "Leave. With pay, of course." Veronica said, "There's more. IA wants to speak with your father, and so does the mayor." Samuel nodded slowly. "I suspected as much." Dr. Foster, who stood quietly near the windows, arms folded, added, "This is the moment when they try to take back the narrative. They'll want to manage you, contain you, soften your statements." Samuel smiled dryly. "Good luck with that." 2 hours later, the mayor arrived. Mayor Alicia Wren, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 50s, strode into Samuel's private conference room with the clipped energy of someone accustomed to being both feared and obeyed. "Mr. Sterling," she said warmly, offering her hand, "you've caused quite the stir." Samuel shook it. "I prefer to say the truth caused the stir. I was just the messenger." Wren smiled thinly. Daniel caught the micro-flinch behind her eyes. She didn't like losing control of the narrative. She sat, smoothing the lapels of her blazer. "First, let me express my deepest apologies for what happened to you. Officer Dalton's actions were unacceptable. The department is already reviewing his record. Reviewing, Samuel repeated. Not disciplining? Wren cleared her throat. Investigations take time. Dr. Foster cut in. When it's one of us hurt, the investigation is lightning fast. When it's the officer, suddenly everything must be properly examined. The mayor turned toward her coolly. And you are someone who buried her brother because of a traffic stop. Wren's jaw tightened. Samuel interjected gently. We're all here for the same reason. Let's not lose focus. Wren nodded, collecting herself. Mr. Sterling, I want you to know IA has already begun interviews. The chief is cooperating fully. We're going to determine exactly what happened. Samuel leaned back. Good, because so far the only thing that's clear is what everyone saw. An officer deciding I didn't belong near my own car. Wren inhaled sharply. Which is why I'd like to invite you to join a task force on policing reform, publicly. It would send a powerful message. Daniel stiffened. You want him to endorse you? Wren blinked. I want him involved. No, you want political cover. Veronica shot him a warning look, but Samuel raised a hand. Daniel is simply being direct. Wren sighed. Mr. Sterling, this case is complicated. The officer claims he had probable cause. The union is already gearing up to defend him aggressively. Samuel's expression darkened. Probable cause is not defined by prejudice. Tell that to the courts, Wren murmured. Dr. Foster stepped forward. We will. Samuel turned his attention back to the mayor. Madam Mayor, I appreciate your visit, but I won't be joining any committee, task force, or advisory panel, at least not yet. The city needs results, not panels. Wren frowned. Then what do you want? Samuel stood slowly, age momentarily evident in the movement of his shoulders, but his voice held iron. I want the truth, and I want accountability. Nothing more, nothing less. Wren exhaled, defeated but respectful. Very well. Expect a formal inquiry to begin tomorrow. I'll make sure it's thorough. She left the room with her entourage, tension trailing behind her like smoke. The next morning, Internal Affairs came. Detective Elena Ruiz and Sergeant Thomas Hale, both seasoned investigators, both visibly nervous. Cameras had swarmed the outside of the building since dawn. Every movement inside was now a headline waiting to happen. Ruiz began the interview gently. Mr. Sterling, thank you for meeting with us. Of course. Ask whatever you need. Ruiz pressed record. Let's begin with the moment Officer Dalton approached your vehicle. Samuel recounted it cleanly, in measured detail. The tone Dalton used, the accusations, the grip on his arm, the shove against the car. He described the fear he refused to show, the humiliation he chose not to let define him. Then Ruiz asked, Did you resist in any way? Samuel stared at her evenly. I am 75 years old, detective. The only thing I resisted was becoming a statistic. Hale shifted uncomfortably. Ruiz continued. Did the officer give any lawful reason for the stop? No, only assumptions. Ruiz nodded grimly. That matches the footage. The body cam was activated late, far too late. Daniel leaned forward. Late, or intentionally late. Ruiz didn't answer, but her eyes said enough. They wrapped the interview an hour later. As they stood to leave, Ruiz paused. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm sorry. Not as an officer, as a person. Samuel nodded. Then try not to let the system strip that humanity from you. Ruiz swallowed hard and left. For the next week, the investigation consumed the city. Records were polled, Dalton's previous stops analyzed, testimony collected, statements leaked. Experts debated whether the incident was racial profiling, excessive force, or both. Dalton remained silent. The union defended him fiercely, claiming he followed protocol, though no one could explain which protocol involved handcuffing a 75-year-old millionaire next to his own vintage Bentley without probable cause. Protests grew, news cycles intensified, Samuel's speech went viral internationally. And through it all, Samuel remained calm, thoughtful, deliberate. He spoke when he needed to. He stayed silent when others tried to use him. He refused to become a mascot, a weapon, or a mouthpiece. He simply lived truthfully, which increasingly was the most dangerous thing he could do. The breakthrough came 8 days after the incident. Veronica burst into Samuel's office holding a printed report, face flushed with adrenaline. "Sir, you need to see this." Samuel took the pages slowly. Daniel leaned over his shoulder. It was Dalton's employment file. A decade of service, 4 commendations, 3 disciplinary actions, 1 suspension, and, buried deep, an internal counseling report documenting bias-related complaints. "Damn," Daniel muttered. "They tried to bury it." Veronica pointed at a line near the bottom. "This was leaked anonymously to the press 20 minutes ago. It's already circulating." "Anonymous?" Samuel asked. "Yes," she nodded. A soft voice came from the doorway. "I leaked it." They all turned. Dr. Foster stood there, posture steady, gaze unapologetic. It was the right thing to do. Daniel blinked in shock. "You could be charged." "Then let them charge me. But the truth is out, and now the department has to act." Samuel exhaled, a slow release of pressure he'd carried for days. "This will force their hand." Veronica glanced at her tablet as a new alert pinged. "Look!" A live press conference flickered onto the screen. The police chief stood at the podium, face grave. After reviewing evidence, including unreported disciplinary history, Officer Dalton has been terminated, effective immediately. A full criminal investigation will follow. Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Finally. But Samuel wasn't smiling. Dr. Foster noticed. "You're not satisfied?" "I am relieved, but not satisfied."
One firing does not fix a system. She nodded slowly. "No, but it's a start." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had fought for years, who lost someone she loved, who carried grief like a second spine. "A start," he agreed. She stepped closer. "Mr. Sterling, everything you did, it mattered. It still matters. You turned a moment of injustice into a catalyst." Samuel shook his head. "I didn't turn anything. I simply told the truth." "Exactly," she said. "And the truth is sometimes more powerful than every law on the books." Late that night, after the staff left and the city quieted, Samuel returned to the penthouse terrace overlooking the skyline. Daniel joined him with 2 glasses of bourbon. "Do you think it changes anything?" Daniel asked quietly. Samuel stared at the city, the towers he built, the streets he walked, the people chanting his name earlier that week. "Yes," he said finally. "Maybe not everything, maybe not forever, but something changed." Daniel handed him a glass. "To justice?" Samuel smiled faintly. "To accountability, and to the hope that someday men like Officer Dalton will no longer be taught to fear men like me." They clinked glasses. A soft breeze swept across the terrace. Below, the city pulsed with life, flawed, vibrant, conflicted, hopeful. And above it, Samuel Sterling stood tall, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a man who refused to be diminished. A man who turned an insult, a shove, a prejudice into a reckoning long overdue.
A man who reminded the world that dignity, real dignity, wasn't something anyone gave you. It was something no one could take away.